And as the legal pressure continues to build on former President Donald Trump, he is increasingly embracing the radical QAnon conspiracy theory movement. And it's not just online. The latest example coming over the weekend at a rally that Trump held in North Carolina. NBC News correspondent Vaughn Hilliard was at that rally, and he joins us now. So, Vaughn, tell us about the rally. What did he say? What stood out to you?
You know, it was 1 week ago at a rally when, at the end of his remarks, the song started playing that folks in the crowd recognized as being nearly identical to the QAnon theme song. Folks raised their pointer fingers in the air, and some in Trump world pushed back that it wasn't actually the QAnon theme song, despite them sounding identical. And then that's where the rally this weekend was telling, because yet again, at the end of the rally, that same song played and fingers went into the air, and it speaks to a movement that started in 2017 that was very much fringe, though, over the course of these last years, now being overtly embraced by the former president himself. Take a look.
It scenes like this when Donald Trump's embrace of QAnon became clear.
We will fight for America like no one has ever fought before.
The former president at rallies over the last week, closing with the song.
And in no condition to lead our country.
The music, I think it's where we go one, we go all.
That's the title of the QAnon conspiracy movement theme song. And Trump has reposted a flurry of QAnon memes on his social media account. But now QAnon's conspiracy theories have become vast and violent.
I believe he has the military behind him, and I believe that he's going to be gone.
What does that mean, gone?
He's going to go to jail for treason.
Will the military help Donald Trump with that? What does that look like?
Yes, that's what I believe.
The movement believes there's a cabal of Satan-worshipping pedophiles and hopes that Donald Trump will wage a secret battle with the military to reclaim power, arresting and even executing government officials, Democrats, Hollywood figures, and other elites.
Do you believe, Democratic leaders should be executed?
Anybody that's treason.
The reach of the QAnon movement is enormous. And you're seeing the ideas of QAnon worm their way into places that they never would have before.
But the QAnon movement has become more than memes, slogans in internet rabbit holes.
My dad thought that he'd carry out martial law.
Donald Trump would.
Yeah.
21-year-old Rebecca and other close family members say her father grew isolated working from home during the pandemic and became so obsessed with QAnon that he grew paranoid.
He got a gun and tried to kill everyone in my family, and he would have tried to kill me too if I was there.
On September 11th, he killed Rebecca's mother, the family dog, and shot her sister. He was then killed in a standoff with police, who say they are investigating any specific motive, which is yet to be determined.
How was your dad before this?
He was a totally different person, and I can say I think I started grieving him before this happened. I started realizing that he's not the same person I grew up with.
The once fringe movement festered after the 2020 election as followers baked new conspiracies.
People don't have to be on 4chan. They don't have to be on 8chan to follow QAnon. It has seeped into other parts of the far-right ecosystem.
We the people make up Q.
We've all been waiting and we're ready.
I think there are a lot of families who are impacted by this, and nobody takes it seriously.
What would be your message to Donald Trump?
I just think you should have some integrity and try to denounce these people.
I just want to underscore Rebecca's story here, and the fact that Rebecca, just 2 weeks after her mother was killed, her sister was shot, the family dog killed, and she agreed to speak with us. There are families around this country who have similar stories, potentially not maybe the violence, but in terms of family members that have gone down this very dark, dangerous hole, isolating themselves, paranoia. Those first two folks at the Trump rally that you heard from that we talked to, those were the very first two people we asked if they'd go on camera, not knowing that they believed wholly in the QAnon movement. And I think it's important when we talk about this, it's a dangerous, dark, violent path here. We're talking about execution, the mass arrest of government officials, Hollywood figures, taking them to Guantanamo Bay and then executing them. this isn't just a few people. This is folks around the country that are believing this movement. And the issue with Donald Trump's embrace is that it is now seeping into the mainstream of the Republican Party. This is an entanglement of conspiracy theories here. And when we hear about the deep state, or when we hear about the idea of groomers, I mean, these are extensions of the QAnon conspiracy movement. So while and not everybody within the Republican Party are Trump supporters. We talked to several that push back and said they wish Donald Trump would not embrace it. The elements of these conspiracy theories have percolated over these last, especially 2 years, and seeped into this culture war that the Republican Party has held on to. And when you look at these rallies, Wilmington, North Carolina, it's not the biggest town in America, yet you still had 3,000 to 4,000 people there. And of course, not everybody believes in these grand conspiracy theory. At the same time, when you look at these images, you look at these videos, you go and talk to folks, there are too many that believe in this dark, violent path, guys.
Yeah, and they go to extremes to show their belief. NBC's Von Hilliard, thank you very much. That was an absolutely gripping and jarring report. Again, it shows the dangers that cults have on vulnerable people. And these are cult movements.
And John Heilman, we were talking about before the 37%, 38%. It seems that Trump, by now embracing QAnon, is boiling that support down even more. And the question is, again, as he embraces QAnon, as he does it overtly, he leaves more, not just, let's say, swing Democrats, working class Democrats, independents, but even Republicans. He leaves even more Republicans behind it. And I guess that's the most troubling thing. Right. One of the most troubling things to me, he knows that there is not a majority way forward embracing this violent rhetoric, embracing this violent conspiracy. And it unfortunately leads to other conclusions that maybe he's given up on winning popular elections, popular votes, electoral counts. Maybe now it is all about the violence. It all is about an insurrection. It all is, in his mind, about a civil war.
Yeah, yes. I mean, totally possible, Joe. And I'd say two things about this, right? One, in 2020, Donald Trump got more votes in 2020 than he got in 2016. By a lot, millions more votes, right? He still got whomped by Joe Biden in the popular vote, and yet he came within a few thousand votes because of our electoral college system in 3 states of winning electoral college victory. There's lots of ways that Donald Trump, as he did in 2016, as he came close to doing in 2020, can become president without winning a popular vote majority. That's one thing. And I think that's very much in his head. He's been told over and over again by strategists that that is the path for him. He can't win he couldn't in 2016, he couldn't in 2020, and he won't in 2024 win a majority vote. He has to thread the needle and string together those 270 electoral votes and be a minority president. Number one. Number two, I don't think he cares about. He knows that the path for him forward is always about division, anger, energy. The division, dividing the country, reducing the core of his base down, but at the same time making that like into a sauce of a kind, right? It's like he reduces it down, it gets stronger, more virulent, more toxic, more energized, also more violent. Does Trump think about is he trying to necessarily stoke violence, or does he just not care? Because he sort of thinks that violence, if violence is where the energy comes from, great. If that's the way that the path that for him to keep power or regain power, great. I think he doesn't care one way or the other. If there was a way to do this without violence, he'd probably be perfectly happy to do that. But if it's going to take violence, so be it. And I think that's what you see here in Vaughn's reporting and with his embrace of QAnon. He's not focused on, oh boy, I'm going to lose a few swing voters here. He's focused on the fact that the people who are going to be at the core of his base are going to be more animated, more ginned up, more willing to take to the barricades to do whatever's necessary to try to reinstall him in power. And that's the danger, is that the fact that the base is getting smaller, it makes it more dangerous in a lot of ways, because those are the people who are willing to do things like take up arms and press the questions and tactics that lead to civil war.
And as Vaughn pointed out, that the extremes, if you have a vulnerable person who gets swallowed up in these conspiracy theories, They can do extremely dangerous things. That poor, poor young girl.